Good afternoon. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, Senior Correspondent for Englebrook Independent News. Thank you for joining me from Manhattan. Today, we're going to be talking about something far more important than immigration politics. We're going to be talking about human lives and whether our elected officials are applying the same standards of accountability when those lives are lost in government custody. New Jersey Democratic members of Congress are demanding answers from Department of Homeland Security following 3 deaths connected to Delaney Hall, the federal immigration detention facility in Newark, New Jersey. They have every right to demand those answers, and they should. But today, we're asking them to answer a question as well. Where was the same urgency had been when prisoners have died, and in some cases have been murdered, inside correctional institutions operated by the state of New Jersey? And where was the political outrage when Delaney Hall itself was being used to house inmates connected to the Essex County correctional system? This isn't about defending ICE. It isn't about defending Delaney Hall, and it certainly isn't about minimizing the deaths of anybody in government custody. It's about something much simpler. If every life matters, then every death deserves scrutiny. And accountability cannot depend upon whether the government institution involved is controlled by Washington or from Trenton. Today, we're going to examine the facts, the people who had died, and what we know, and what we don't know, and that the uncomfortable question New Jersey political leaders should be willing to answer. This is my commentary. There are some issues that should never become political football. A human being dying while in government custody is one of them. It should not matter whether the person is an immigration detainee, a convicted prisoner, a Republican, a Democrat, an American citizen, or someone who entered this country illegally. When government takes away somebody's freedom, government also assumes the extraordinary responsibility for the person's safety. And when somebody dies in custody, there should be questions, there should be records, there should be transparency, and when circumstances warrant it, there should be independent investigation. That brings us to Delaney Hall in Newark. On Thursday, August 6th, all 9 Democratic members of New Jersey delegation in the U.S. House sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security demanding answers concerning 3 deaths that they say are connected to immigration detention facility. Those lawmakers are Eliana Mija, Bonnie Watson Coleman, LaMonica McGlyver, Robert Menendez, Frank Pullen, Nellie Pooh, Donald Norcross, Herb Conway, and Josh Gotherman. Their letter demanded medical records, monetary review, inspections, staffing assessments, corrections action plans, and other information from DHS and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The lawmakers wrote that the 3 deaths, allegations of medical neglect, restrictions on oversight, and reduced transparency represents what they called terrible track record of care. They have given DHS and ICE until August 12th to provide answers, and they are entitled to ask those questions. In fact, they should ask them. But today, I want to ask another question. Where is the same level of outrage when somebody dies inside New Jersey State Prison? Because if our principle is that government has the responsibility for human beings incarcerated, that principle cannot suddenly end at the front gates of Delaney Hall. First, the facts. Edwin Lopez Cornejo, a 41-year-old Salvadorian national, died August 1st after suffering a medical emergency while detained at Delaney Hall. According to ICE, facility and medical personnel responded and called 911. Lopez Cornejo was transported to University Hospital in Newark. ICE say he received medical care while in custody. His family disputes whether the care was adequate. His mother said Lopez Cornejo suffered from diabetes, high blood pressure, and seizures, and that shortly before his death he complained of numbness in his face and hands. His family has raised serious allegations about whether the receiving necessary medication. Those allegations deserve investigation, but there is something else the public needs to understand. As of this commentary, the official cause of Lopez Cornejo's death was not been determined publicly. That means nobody, not ICE, not activists, not politicians, and not news media, should declare the case was closed before medical evidence is completed. The earlier publicly identified death at Delaney Hall involves Jean Wilson Brutas, a 41-year-old Haitian national who died on December 12th of 2025, shortly after entering ICE custody. ICE initially described his death as a result from the suspected natural causes. Brutas suffered a medical emergency and was transported to the University Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. His family subsequently demanded more information about what had happened. And again, they're entitled to those answers. The third death, now cited by New Jersey congressional Democrats, presented an additional transparency question. According to reporting and statements from Representative Rob Menendez, another person who detained at Delaney Hall experienced a medical emergency in late July and was released from ICE custody and subsequently died at University Hospital. That person identified had not been publicly disclosed. ICE reportedly did not classify that death as an in-custody death because the individual had been released before dying. That deserves examination as well. 3 deaths connected to one detention facility are unquestionably serious, but seriousness requires precision. At this point, the publicly available evidence does not establish that Edwin Lopez Cornejo was killed at Delaney Hall. It does not establish that Jean Wilson Brutas was murdered, and it does not establish that the unidentified third individual was murdered. There are allegations concerning medical care. There are competing accounts. There are unanswered questions. Those are reasons to investigate. They are not reasons to reach a verdict before the investigation. And this is where the political conversation becomes uncomfortable. New Jersey has had deaths inside its own correctional systems that also demand public attention. Consider Martin Sanchez. Sanchez was 41 years old and incarcerated at Bayside State Prison. On November 21st, 2022, reportedly one day before he was scheduled to be released, Sanchez was found brutally injured inside the prison cell. The medical examiner ruled his death as a homicide caused by blunt force head injuries and neck compression. Another inmate, Bruce Duet, was ultimately convicted of murdering Sanchez and in 2025 was sentenced to life in prison. Think about that for a moment. A man was one day away from leaving prison. Instead, he left dead. Then there was David Silva. Silva was 46, was incarcerated at Northern State Prison in Newark, where he had been encountered with a corrections police officer on December 3rd of 2024. He was hospitalized. He died on December 12th. The New Jersey Attorney General's office opened an investigation under state law requiring investigations of death occurring during an encounter with law enforcement officer or while a person in custody. His death should matter too. Then there was Ryan Marsh. Marsh died at Bayside State Prison in April of 2025 from an overdose. In July of this year, authorities charged another prisoner, Alfred Bishop, in connection with the death, alleging Bishop supplied the drugs that killed Marsh. And just months ago came another case. 28-year-old Shane Jones was incarcerated at Garden State Youth Corrections Facility. On April 18th of 2026, a corrections officer found Jones laying on the floor of his cell he shared with another prisoner. He was taken to Capitol Health Regional Medical Center and died. The Burlington County medical examiner found severe internal trauma to his neck and throat. His death was officially ruled as a homicide. His cellmate, Xavier Keppen, was subsequently charged with first-degree murder. That charge remains an allegation unless and until proven guilty in court. These cases are not identical. They should not artificially lump together, but that is precisely the point. Every custodial death should be examined on its own evidence. There is another piece of history worth remembering. Delaney Hall did not suddenly materialize when Donald Trump returned to the White House. Long before it operated as an ICE detention facility, Delaney Hall was a part of New Jersey's correctional landscape. Court records show Essex County had contracted with private entities to house county inmates at Delaney Hall dating back to 2000. A 2014 New Jersey appellate decision described approximately 255 county inmates being housed there under the Essex County arrangement. And in 2022, official assessment described Delaney Hall as an Essex County correctional facility operated by GEO Reentry under contract to provide alternative incarceration and resident treatment housing for people detained at Essex County Corrections. At the time of the assessment, 236 inmates were housed there. The contract contemplated hundreds more. The assessment itself identified security and safety concerns, including contraband and potential weapon accessibility to inmates and exposed electrical wiring. So here's the question New Jersey political establishment should answer. Where was today's level of political alarm when Delaney Hall was housing people from Essex County? Where were the demands when the facility itself was inherently unacceptable? Where was the calls for wall-to-wall national coverage? That does not excuse anything happening there today. It puts today's outrage into historical context, and Governor Mikey Sherrill should answer the same questions. Governor Sherrill has been outspoken about Delaney Hall. She has called reported conditions these unacceptable. She has sought out access to the facility. She has called for its closure, and she said her administration is working with New Jersey congressional delegations following Lopez Cornejo's death. Those are legitimate actions for a governor to take, but Sherrill was not absent from public life during years of New Jersey's prison system was experiencing deaths and serious controversies. She served in the United States House of Representatives from 2019 until becoming the governor. Now, to be fair, a member of Congress has the direct federal oversight authority over ICE and DHS and does not administer the New Jersey Department of Corrections. That distinction matters, but moral outrage is not limited by jurisdiction. If the argument is that government has the duty to protect people incarcerated, then New Jersey government has exactly that responsibility for people incarcerated in New Jersey prisons. And now that Mikey Sherrill is governor, that responsibility belongs directly to her administration. So Englebrook Independent News believes the standards should be simple. Investigate Delaney Hall, release the facts that can legally be released, determine whether Lopez Cornejo received his prescribed medication, determine exactly what happened to Jean Wilson Brutus, identify, when legally permissible, the third person whose death lawmakers say was connected to Delaney Hall, determine whether emergency protocols were followed, and if GEO Group's employees, ICE personnel, or anybody else failed in their legal responsibilities, hold them accountable. But then, apply the standards elsewhere. Ask how Martin Sanchez could have been beaten and strangled to death in Bayside State Prison one day before being released. Ask how drugs capable of causing fatal overdose reach Ryan Marsh inside the supposedly secure state prison. Ask how Shane Jones suffered fatal neck and throat injuries inside the cell at Garden State Youth Corrections Facility, and demand answers about every unexplained or suspicious deaths occurring under New Jersey's Correctional Authority, because there cannot be two standards for human life. One for a death that can be blamed on Washington, and another death occurring inside the institution controlled by Trenton. If New Jersey Democrat congressional delegations want transparency from DHS, demand it. If Governor Sherrill wants accountability from ICE, demand it. But the same political leaders should demonstrate the concerns when the institution involved carries the word State of New Jersey over the doors. That isn't Republican position. That isn't Democrat position. It shouldn't even be controversial. Every person taken into government custody becomes, at least in this part, the government's responsibility. Some are immigration detainees, some are convicted criminals, some may have committed terrible crimes. None of that gives government permission to ignore their safety. And none of it gives politicians permission to decide which custodial death deserves outrage based upon which political party controls the institution. The people who died at Delaney Hall deserves answers. So do their families. But Martin Sanchez deserves safety. Shane Jones deserves safety. Ryan Marsh deserves safety. David Silva deserves answers, and every person incarcerated in New Jersey deserves the protection that the state is legally obligated to provide. So investigate Delaney Hall. Investigate it thoroughly. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. But while New Jersey political leaders are demanding what Washington answers for people who die in federal custody, perhaps they should turn towards the prisons in their own backyard. Because accountability only means something when we demand it from everybody. And that's where I want to leave today. Every death we've discussed represents a human being. Behind every one of those names is a family that deserves the truth. That includes the families of the people who died following detention at Delaney Hall. It includes the families of the people who died inside New Jersey state prisons. And it should not matter which political party controls the government responsible for its custody. Investigate Delaney Hall, demand the records, determine whether the proper medical care was provided, find out whether procedures were followed, and if somebody failed in their responsibility, hold that person accountable. But also do the exact same thing when somebody is beaten to death inside New Jersey's prisons. Do it when drugs enter a supposedly secure state institution and an inmate dies from an overdose. Do it when an inmate suffers fatal injuries inside a prison cell. And do it when any person dies under circumstances that raise legitimate questions about the government's responsibility for their safety. Accountability cannot become something politicians discover only when the government being investigated belongs to the other political party. Because once that happens, it isn't about accountability anymore, it's about politics. And human lives deserve better than that. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, Senior Correspondent for Englebrook Independent News. Thank you for joining us for continued coverage of Delaney Hall, New Jersey correctional systems, and the issues affecting communities across the Garden State. Stay with Englebrook Independent News. Have a safe evening. Good night.